wrenching day in this community. And take a look here as we're standing at the site where the family was killed. And this crowd has really been growing by the minute here tonight. At one point, people were lining both sides of this street. Some people climbing to lay flowers, others openly sobbing. Everyone here just trying to come to terms with the horror of what happened here on Sunday night. And a warning that some of the details in this report are difficult to hear. Kosar Maki and her family were driving past this intersection at around 8:40 Sunday night. They stopped at the red light and waved at a group of pedestrians, a family of 5 wearing traditional Muslim dress, who were waiting to cross the street.
My husband just rolled down his window and said salam alaikum to him, and he said salam alaikum. He went. As soon as we turned the way, we heard the ambulances.
Assalamu alaikum. The Arabic greeting means peace be upon you. It was likely the last words they spoke. Moments later, police say this truck sped towards the family, jumped the curb, and plowed into them. Police say they were dead because of their Islamic faith.
It's scary because my husband and my children, we walk these sidewalks, and we have other families too that walk these sidewalks. It could have been us. That's what I keep thinking. It could have been us.
Jen Karp arrived moments later to find bodies strewn dozens of meters down the street. None of them were moving except for the youngest, Fayez Afsa, just 9 years old. He was found lying on the ground.
Crying, where's my family? I want my family. My leg hurts, my hand hurts. We told the there was helping his family, and that he had to go to the hospital. And just I told him to keep his head down, and we're trying to make sure he didn't see his family. It's terrible.
The boy remains in hospital and is expected to survive. A family friend says he still doesn't know that his grandmother, his parents, his 15-year-old sister are gone.
It was a really tragic scene. Even the police officers were in tears.
Friends say the family arrived from Pakistan about 15 years ago and were well known in the community. The couple, Salman and Adiha, both in their 40s, worked as a physiotherapist and an environmental engineer. Daughter, 15-year-old Yumna, was a bright student at this high school where flags are flying at half-mast.
Very shy and very loving, and she was the kind who would look at you, smile, and look away. That's a beautiful smile.
The community is devastated, horrified, but not all are surprised.
I'm afraid for my life, for my daughter's life. What do? You go out and every truck I see, I look at it and I see a white guy, and they should open guns, man. Seriously, I need protection. We came here looking for peace. I see them every freaking day.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome to this special live event. We wanted to share with you and respond to the attack that you just saw that happened this past weekend in London, Ontario. We wanted to play a couple of more videos, and then we'll respond a little bit more to the unfortunate unfortunate loss of life, but the reminder again, once again, that this is real. This, what we're talking about, what we have been talking about, is definitely real, and it's important for our community to be mindful in this moment right now. Here's the President of Canada in responding to the attack.
There are no words that can ease the grief of having 3 generations murdered in their neighborhood. There are no words that can undo the pain and, yes, the anger of this community. There are no words that can fix the future of that little boy who has had his future taken away. But know this, you are not alone. All Canadians mourn with you and stand with you tonight and always. We can and we will act. We can and we will choose a better way. When someone hurts any of us, when someone targets any parent or child or grandparent, we must all stand together and say no. No to hatred and to Islamophobia. No to terror and to racism.
That was President Trudeau, who you just heard from. And here's another short video again, dealing with this unfortunate attack.
Not again. It's a heartbroken refrain because the news today is horrific and the latest in a painful loop of violence.
I don't see why people can't just spread love and have to spread hate, and why people can't just live their lives without having to face this sort of discrimination.
At the end of the day, our hearts are broken. Our hearts are broken. Our minds are numb. Right? We are reminded of the worst kind of situation that can happen to our community.
A reminder of a recent history that is dark and ugly. 2013 to 2019. The National Council of Canadian Muslims tracked more than 300 incidents targeting Muslims, including more than 30 acts of physical violence. The year 2017 stands out, 72 attacks that year alone. Worst among them, the bloodstained nightmare of the Quebec City mosque shootings. In a community still recovering from the murders of 6 men there, leaders say today's news pierced their hearts.
It's the saddest news that I heard this year.
Labidi says what happened in his mosque could have been a lesson, should have been a message against hatred.
And we should work together that way to fight against racism and hate crime.
Calls condemning today's violence are mounting, and advocates say police calling the London attack a hate crime helps the fight against it.
You need our public authorities to tell us and provide us the information because the fear, that vacuum that we all sort of exist in once something like this happens where we don't know what's going on is also very dangerous and very frightening.
As the shock settles, more questions. The hope is more answers will emerge. While in Toronto, the lights were dimmed to mark a dark day drawing to a close. Joanna Rumeliotis, CBC News, Toronto.
I want to bring on Mohammed Ibrahim, Deputy Director of CARE Minnesota, Zainab Mohammed, our Outreach Coordinator. Thank you both quickly for joining and responding. I know we might have a few other community leaders join us in a few minutes as well. You know, this is a gruesome reminder about really what's been going on for quite some time now. This issue is an issue that I think for many of us Muslims, we have seen it. We deal with it. We're constantly vigilant about the fact that we are living in a world that we just had. The attack on the Capitol on January 6th, that the discussions are still going on right now about that. There's still discussions about, what's going on, all over this country with hate crimes and also the rise of, obviously Islamophobia now and also the rise of other Asian hate. We've seen now anti-Semitism. We've seen the rise of all of these things. And I think, this past Sunday when this happened and we started to hear about it and, you saw initial coverage of it being focused on a car hitting people, but really this was a well-planned attack. He was ready to be shot at. He was wearing Kevlar. So this person was deliberately hunting for a Muslim, and this family May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant them the best of akhirah and make them martyrs. We're wearing their Islamic clothing that is easily identifiable. And the saddest thing is, one of the saddest things that came out of this is obviously this orphan, young Faisal. And, just seeing the community come together. But again, we are reminded that this can happen. And as Care Minnesota, we are very mindful of the fact that Minnesota has perhaps the most visible Muslim population in the country. And not only here in the Twin Cities, but also across greater Minnesota. And so we wanted to respond quickly today to talk about the impact of this hate. We wanted to talk about our community vigilance. And we wanted to talk specifically about, especially to our allies, to remind them that, these types of attacks happen all the time. And we have to be mindful of, that we're not out of the woods. This idea that all of a sudden, Trump obviously used Islamophobia to gain political wins, but it didn't begin with Trump, and it's not going to end with Trump, and so it's important for the community to be mindful, to be vigilant, not to live in fear, but to be vigilant, but also in the same time to realize that we have a lot of work ahead of us. We have a hate crime bill in the state of Minnesota that we're trying to pass. It's at least from what we know now, it hasn't passed yet. It hasn't made it to where it needs to go. And again, it's just back to square one. Like, hate is alive, and we also know that here in the United States, sowing just hatred in America is actually a ploy used by the enemies of the United States. So I want to bring Muhammad and Zainab. I guess I wanted to hear from both of you your initial reaction to this horrific attack, and what we really need to be thinking about as a community.
Yeah, and first and foremost, I want to say, may Allah have mercy on, the family, and may Allah make them enter the highest level of paradise, and place them, amongst the martyrs in the afterlife, inshallah. And I think for me, there was a post that was circulating around social media that talked about the 9-year-old, finding out that now they're an orphan, right? And from the news clip that you played earlier, we're talking about a hate crime that affected, 3 generations, right? You had, the grandmother was in the car, the parents, and the younger daughter. And, they got up in the morning, they weren't bothering nobody, they were going about their day. And you heard from the family friend, and there's a lot of people that talked about the family talking, saying that they wouldn't harm a fly. They were just going about their business, going about their normal day. And yet you have somebody who is out there, hunting them, right? And that idea of just, when we're talking about hate, we're talking about this is the extremist level, and, and no form of hate should, ever be welcomed, and we're talking about somebody going on a hunt to hunt this family, to hunt people who visibly look Muslim, and kill them in such manner is not only traumatic, but it's horrifying, and and we cannot continue to wait for these things to happen in order for us to act from a policy perspective. And I could only imagine, the trauma that the communities is feeling as well. But we must stop and be proactive to make sure this never happens again. But it really does shake all of us down to our core, because people are just simply targeted for believing in their faith, for choosing to be visibly showcase their faith, and they were going about their normal day business. And and is this what Canada represents? Is this what America would represent? And the answer is no. But we would hope that we can go beyond this by our actions and by policy and upholding and making sure that, elected officials, understand this. And we do have this hate bill that's stalled here in the state of Minnesota, but we are not strangers to these types of attacks. We've seen messages vandalized in Minnesota as recently as, a few months ago, or is it last month, excuse me. You have a masjid in Bloomington that was bombed, and you had a masjid in St. Paul that was attacked. And so this hate against Muslims is not something that is new. It is something that is very, very serious, and that we need to take, try to treat it in the best way to make sure that is eradicated in our community, because nobody wakes up in the morning and decides to hate people. This hate is taught, and it shows up in many, many, many different forms. But our communities, cannot continue to live in fear, and we must not only stand with each other, but we must activate our allies and turn them into accomplices, so that way nobody should, regardless of the color of their skin or the language that they speak or the faith or the God that they believe in, should ever live in fear of just practicing. And there's this video that I watched earlier that broke my heart, and it was this guy saying, and it was a family friend of the late family, and he was like, I wasn't ready to tell my 9-year-old, what happened, because it's, how do you explain to a 9-year-old, oh, this person killed somebody, and his mother and his wife and his daughter, because they chose to believe in God, and it's and it was just, he was like, I never thought I would ever have to have that conversation, and also say, why, you're not going to be able to visit your neighbors anymore, or we're not going to see this person at the masjid anymore, and so on and so forth. And, so we're talking about generational trauma, and at the same time, these unnecessary and conversations that one should never look forward or even think about having, these families are having, and it's not only unfair, but it's not right, and it's unjust. And we have to make sure, and we have to do everything that we can to eradicate this type of hate on our communities. And people can go to the grocery store or jump in a van with their family and not have to worry about somebody hunting them because they chose to believe in a specific religion, or they chose to believe to wear a headscarf, or so on and so forth. And it's absolutely numbing, absolutely numbing.
Zainab, I wanted to bring you in. I think particularly you being a Muslim woman, I think hijab, you're easily identifiable than me and Muhammad. Muhammad and I, could walk and no one will know, unless we're wearing khamis or something very identifying. Can you talk about, I guess, the lived experience, but also just the reality of families across this country and the world now, who have to think twice about taking a stroll down the road and not knowing that they will be targeted in this kind of a fashion?
Yeah, well, first of all, like, my heart and my thoughts and my prayers are with the family, and all the loved ones that they've left behind. This is very incredibly tragic. But we also know that it happens all the time. It's been consistently happening. And as far as my experience as a visibly Muslim woman, it's very easy to notice it, whether you're walking into a really nice restaurant and you don't feel like you belong, and you can't help to wonder, maybe it's the color of my skin, but as a Muslim hijabi woman, more often than not, it's really because of the way I'm dressed, right? Because it's easy to identify me as Muslim and by my faith, and it's easy to be attacked. And I think what people don't understand is, during the Trump administration, it was loud, it was clear, but it was actually a lot easier because at least we knew everything that was happening. But under the Biden and the Obama administration, it was much more harder for Muslims, because it has become way more systematic. It was a lot more quieter, but Muslims felt it, right? And so the attack on this family it's really sad. It's incredibly disheartening, but it's true to what's happening every day that we experience as Muslims across the world, especially in the West. Whether it's a Muslim, two kids walking in the middle of the street after Ramadan and not feeling like they can go to prayer in the middle of the night on the most holiest month and getting attacked, or a woman at Applebee's walking into a restaurant to order food and getting hit by glass, right? Or it's, being on Office Max, or it doesn't matter what it is. If you're physically Muslim and a person of color, it's hard. And so, like Muhammad said, it's really important that we take this as seriously as possible, and not only we have conversations about it, but like come up things to do about Islamophobia, because it's growing, it's been growing, and it will continue to grow, and probably more quiet than it was under the Trump administration, which is far more dangerous.
No, absolutely, absolutely, and I think you hit it on the nail when it comes to what really the purpose behind even just this short live event that we're doing is that people need to wake up that Islamophobia is real, that this is happening, and sometimes we see these things in moments. But Muhammad, you brought a great point. We just had multiple incidents that have happened in the state of Minnesota outside of the mosque vandalism. We're also seeing Islamophobia in different fashions. We're seeing Islamophobia also targeting individuals who are doing their daily, going to the store, going to among other things. So this is a reality. This family was targeted. It was a planned and targeted attack against a Muslim family. I mean, this is perhaps one of the most, I think, the highest level of an attack, because if you go to the mosque, that's a symbol of Islam. Like, you go into the mosque and targeting people there. But here's a family just out on a stroll, right, at a park near their community. And, think about it. Most of us don't walk anymore because our cities are not walkable, right? And so, but the reality is that you take a walk and you're with the family, and you have here, 3 generations of family that mowed down, and thank God that at least this young kid is going to survive. Sad that he's going to be an orphan, but I think he's also going to have the love and support of an entire city and community, because I think people have been outpouring in support to the family. They've been outpouring support to him, particularly young Faisal. And just watching yesterday the program at the mosque to continue to remind people to stand up. And is one interesting thing. I was watching the London mosque bring up these issues, and one thing they specifically brought up, which I thought was pretty interesting, and it kind of reminds us of exactly what's going on, was this idea that this is happening everywhere, right? Injustice is all interconnected, and we need to be mindful of that. And that's why the Minnesota community, particularly the Minnesota Muslim community, is very unique. We have become a subject of a targeted community from a nationally perspective because of also the predominantly Black Muslim community that's here, and that's an added layer that continues to be used. We see the attack and the continuous threats against Congresswoman Ilhan Omar for being a woman, for being Black, for wearing hijab, and for being an immigrant. And all of those trifecta is very well established here by the predominantly largest Muslim population here, the East African community, which all 3 of us come from. And again, our community is very proud. We're proud Muslims. We are unapologetically proud Muslims, and we do that every single day, and we live our days to be fully who we are. And we know that at any moment, any day, something like this could happen. And so it's a reminder and an opportunity for wake up. And I think that's what people need to understand, that hate is going to continue to happen. We want to reduce it. We want to make everything possible, other than really to target efforts to reduce hate, to recognize that hate will continue to perpetuate unless we do something drastically about it. So I just want to wake people up that this summer, a lot of people are going to be out. They're going to be with their families, going to park. We encourage to do that. We don't want people to feel like they could be at home and don't have to do that. But at the same time, I think it's urgency for people to also be extra vigilant. We're seeing now attacks against our mosque. We're seeing other things like that happening. So we want to encourage people to be safe. So I want to bring back Muhammad and just talk about the families and if you wanted to maybe lay out, I know one of the videos we showed earlier kind of broke down the family, but can you talk a little bit about this family that was targeted?
Yes. So it was a family. To kind of talk about the incident a little bit. So it was a family of 5. So you did have Salman, who was the husband or the father, in the family, and he's 46 years old, and he was with his wife Madiha Salman, who is 44 years old, and they also had their 15-year-old daughter with them, Yuma Afzal, and they also had Salman Afzal's older mother, Talat Afzal, who was also killed as well. And you also did have the the younger child with them as well, and this is where they were killed after a black truck slammed into them as they took their routine evening walk. And a point that Jailani touched upon earlier is that this hate has always continued, and we see how hate incidents changed from the Obama administration to the Trump administration, where hate was really all in your face. But since the pandemic really started, for us as a civil rights organization, our cases has doubled, and we've seen a plethora of a strong uptick in racial discrimination and religious discrimination, and that really translated into what we have seen from the uprising of the what do we call it, an uprising, more of an insurrection at the state capitol. And while that was happening in Washington D.C., we also had a mini situation here happen at the state capitol, where folks were not only deeming Islamophobic and racist rhetoric, but they were really upholding the values of trying to bring us back to and trying to dismantle all the progress that was made, in this society and in this country as a whole, little bit as it may be, and they were trying to unwind that. But this really goes back into this conversation, and the point that Zainab alluded to is that at least in the Trump era, we knew it was in our face. We could track it, we could keep ourselves safe from that. But now with this administration, hate is really dormant, and we don't know where it could come from, and it's really unexpected. And the idea of it is not only terrifying, but it only alarms us to do everything that we can to make sure that Salman and his wife and his mother and his daughter get accountability, because true justice at the end of the day would be them here with us today. But at the same time, we want to make sure that the individual is fully accounted for. We know that he was charged with 4 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. But the impact and the trauma that first of all, the young kid has to live with for the rest of their lives is unimaginable, and also the impact of the community and the ripple effect across the world. And we talk about how trauma is interconnected, and we could talk about the many incidents that happens to the Muslim community, whether it's the false church where people were praying inside the masjid in false church in in Australia, where a gunman just walked in and opened fire, right? Or and I remember that incident leaving so many trauma in our communities, where folks would go to Jum'ah prayer, and every single person that would walk by, you could see the entire congregation turn and look at the door, right? So you're talking about that level of trauma, and then now I can only imagine the trauma that families will be feeling if they just want to go on a regular stroll, evening stroll in the park, walking with their mother and their children, and this is something that's going to be living with folks for a long time, and we need this rectified through policy. We need this rectified through action, and we cannot have, you know, Salman and his family and you know, this murder do in vain, and we can't continue to put out sympathies and not put out any solutions from a policy perspective. Although, you know, it's great to know that people are standing with you, but it's better to know that folks are doing everything that they can from a policy perspective to make sure this doesn't happen. And that takes, you know, education, but it also takes setting up measures to make sure that we're not only you know, echoing hate, but at the same time making sure that we can dismantle hate in all of its forms.
No, thank you for doing that. Zainab, did you want to add?
Yeah, I really hope that this matter is taken as seriously as possible. And I really hope that not just conversations, because we've had conversations about Islamophobia and hate on Muslim and Black people. And like you mentioned, our very own Congresswoman gets the most hate out of everybody, all simply because of the fact of that she's a visibly Muslim woman, and that we do have conversations around it, and that we come up with policies that do change it, not just across the state of Minnesota, but the country as well, and that we hold that administration accountable, because they are accountable to Muslim people.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as we kind of wrap up, I want to invite folks who are watching, if they had any questions or tips or ideas, feel free to put it in the chat. I wanted to kind of go a bit, I guess, on a couple of particular just recommendations for families that may be watching this. Number one, I think just be mindful and be responsive to anything that looks suspicious, because I think many of us can easily see that. For our allies, you know, we will be offering hopefully soon some training around how to be a good bystander, an upstander. And one of the techniques of bystander is always, especially if there's a hostile situation where someone is being verbally abusive to someone who is of a minority community, is to, instead of targeting or speaking to the person who's hostile, the recommendation is actually to talk to the person who's being harassed and try to focus your attention on them so that the other person can be disengaged, and that helps with de-escalating the situation. We saw that in Oregon when two persons of color, one being Muslim, was being verbally assaulted. That 3 men came to their aid. 2 were killed because they attacked or they went after the person who was doing it. So the recommendation is always to look and be more responsive to the to the family who or the individual who's being targeted. And so that's the recommendation for Muslim families, is just being more vigilant, be mindful of where you are at, and also just be mindful about always, especially with our children. I know school is about to be over, but bullying is a big concern, and also now bullying doesn't end with school. It's cyberbullying. Kids will continue to bully kids through social media. They will continue to text things outside of the summer. So just be mindful about your teens and children, to be talking to them. And Islamophobia may continue throughout the summer. And we know that Muslim women are oftentimes much more likely to be targeted, much more likely to be not only targeted, but also specifically focused on. So I think it's important that in this moment right now, that we are more vigilant. Islamophobia is real. We will have a number of public events, social media, virtual live events, and among others, to educate the public around Islamophobia, the impact of Islamophobia, and how to be more aware of it. We are also encouraging allies to be much more forceful in preventing by becoming part of our ally network here at CARE Minnesota. It's important that you get out and actually start to understand the problem and be more inclined to support efforts to undermine and to challenge Islamophobia. We are really good in reaction. We get good, and you see even in London here, Ontario, people are really good in reacting. But what we really need now is not just a reaction. What we really need now is an aggressive, proactive efforts to undermine the continuous threat that we're seeing now. And with the January 6th commission now even on falter, we know that hate movement in this country is going to become even more radicalized. We know that they're going to become much more targeting of individuals and groups, and we know the Muslim community has become one of their focal targets. So again, I want, as I conclude, if there are any thoughts from both of you, but I want to send our condolences to them. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this family of the family that will be united in Jannah, in paradise, in Jannatul Firdaus al-A'la, and to young Faisal, who is an orphan now, that he gets the support and love from not only this community, but all communities. And to the rest of the family that lost these amazing 4 people, we send them our condolences, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to ease their pain in this moment and to give them patience. And to the Ontario community, the Canadian Muslim community, we send our solidarity to them, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to continue to protect all individuals and to help us deal with the rise of anti-Islam and particularly Islamophobia that we continue to see manifesting itself, and give us the tools and necessary wisdom to protect our families from it. So if there isn't anything else, we can conclude there. I appreciate both of you jumping on and responding to this. We really need to take this seriously. This is for us, this unfortunate tragedy is perhaps the greatest lesson for all of us, that vigilance is important, and we have a lot of work ahead of us when it comes to Islamophobia. All right, thank you both for joining me. We'll see you guys, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.